Welcome everyone. As you can see, we've got Gordon MacIntyre-Kemp with us. So just going to set the scene for what we want to talk to Gordon about. So look, there you are, you and the First Minister and various Yes supporters. You've obviously got documents in front of you, and so far what we know about it is what's been said in the National. So Gordon, tell us what was happening in that moment, and what's the big picture?
Okay, well, basically, Believe in Scotland started in 2019 from requests really from, I was going around the country talking to Yes groups, and they were saying, look, nobody's coordinating the campaign, nobody's sorting messaging, no one's doing research, no one's putting leaflets together, we don't have any materials to give to people, etc. And I said, well, look, Business for Scotland is an organisation that's a successful business network. We put on events and we have staff. Maybe we could do it. And everybody just went, please. And we realised there was a real demand for that. So we started, Believe in Scotland, and published Scotland a Brief at that time, and just sort of rolled that out across the country. And we're now at a point where, now, they're not all completely active the way they used to be, but we're working on that, trying to get the groups going again. But we ended up with 143 local and national Yes groups affiliated to us. Your own organisation's affiliated to us, one of our members, and then we created a steering group where elected organisers from around the country could sit down once a month with me and basically give a steer to the organisation and how it's going, feedback from the groups, all those sort of things. Now, we haven't had the referendum we wanted, for various reasons. We've also had a real lull in the campaign, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that, we had COVID, and as we came out of COVID, there was a political crisis followed by another political crisis. And the SNP, as the lead party of independence, wasn't really pushing the boat out on independence, and people got a bit frustrated, don't see where it's coming from, etc. And so basically what we've done is we've come up with a plan to reset the campaign from this point onwards, to rebuild our momentum, to regain that momentum that we seem to have lost, although independence support has stayed high. Which is, even though it's now different to SNP support, which is an interesting dynamic that didn't exist before. And we want to reunite the movement, bring it all together through the Scottish Independence Congress, and plan a way forward so that we can win. So that's what we're all about right now. We went to the SNP and we said, look, we've had a pretty bad relationship with the SNP, and from Business for Scotland onwards. We did not have a great relationship during the referendum or afterwards. It was only really with Humza that we started to talk to them on a regular basis. Then we had the Butte House agreement fall through, and more recently we've had meetings with. We went across to Butte House to meet John and Angus Robertson and Keith Brown, and we basically presented everything we wanted the SNP to change and do, and it was a very positive meeting where they saw a lot of sense in what we're suggesting. And a lot of these ideas we've been bashing our head against a brick wall to get them listened to for years. We found ourselves listened to. We said, right, well, if we're going to work together, we want to formalise this, we want to do it better. And Keith Brown came up with an idea, well, let's put it in writing that we're going to do this. I'm like, okay, fine. So we've done that. And this agreement with the SNP, it says that we're going to collaborate, we're going to share ideas, we're going to meet regularly. Yes, that does mean that Believe in Scotland has got regular meetings with the Scottish Government. Great, we can represent the wants and needs of the independence movement, the grassroots independence movement in those meetings. But I think the thing that a lot of people haven't really picked up on, which is the thing that I'm most excited about, is that in this agreement, that the SNP have said that they will send speakers and support and join the Scottish Independence Congress. Now, all over the movement, people have been crying out for a new Scottish Independence Convention, one that works, one that everybody is part of, etc. And the big stumbling block is kind of twofold. Well, you can't do it unless the SNP say they're going to do it. Otherwise, the largest part of the political arm of the movement isn't involved and it's not going to work. And also, you couldn't really do it unless Believe in Scotland were were part of it as well. So they've agreed to join the Scottish Independence Congress, send speakers, etc. To me, that's the new convention, the Indy convention that everybody's been asking for, is now going to happen. It's going to take some time to get in place, to design it, and etc. But we've been doing these quarterly conventions and annual conventions now since 2019, and they've been incredibly well attended. We're saying to ourselves, okay, how do we create one now, which is a hybrid event that brings the whole movement together, not just organisers, not just political parties, but maybe there's a way online to get thousands of activists involved and really make it truly open, truly democratic and inclusive, and any credible organisation that is out there saying we're promoting independence, working for independence, is invited to join in some way, shape or form. Wouldn't that be the restart of the campaign that we're talking about? And so therefore this is a big deal. And one or two people have said, oh, this is just, this is Believe in Scotland and the SNP trying to get together to stitch things up. The sort of thing I get all the time. I mean, I've been getting that for years. Fun enough, I also get people accusing me of SNP supporters accusing me of being an Alba person, and others accusing me of being a Green person. I had a couple of people arguing a few weeks ago. One person says, don't trust this Gordon MacIntyre-Kemp guy because he wants both votes SNP. And I thought, well, I better respond to that and point out that I'm completely neutral on this issue. And just before I started typing, a new comment came up and goes, no, you've got that completely wrong. He doesn't want both votes, he wants Alba in. And I'm sort of went, I'm not getting involved in this conversation. Right, so that's kind of my life at the moment. So there's a few people saying, "Oh, this is just the SNP getting together with Believe in Scotland, and they've always been friends." That is not the case. We genuinely haven't always been friends, although we have always not picked a fight with anybody in the movement. I think that's what people see us not picking fights with people. They just assume we therefore are great friends with every single group, and that's where it comes from. But to be absolutely clear, we've also simultaneously reached out as this was happening, and it happened in a meeting with the SNP that we came to this idea that would be a great idea. The First Minister was definitely for it straight away. So basically, we've simultaneously reached out to the other two political parties with parliamentarians in the ranks, the Scottish Green Party and Alba, and very positive conversations have happened. Meetings are arranged for the very near future. So what I would like to have within a couple of weeks, I can't guarantee this, but I hope it's the case that within a couple of weeks, Believe in Scotland will have the 143 affiliated local and national yes groups and agreements in place, memorandums of understanding, if you like, in place with every major political party that has a parliamentarian. And then once we've got that, we'll design the Scottish Independence Congress and we'll figure a way to get everybody else involved.
Could you say a bit more about, what the Congress might look like? Okay, I mean, you've just said you need to figure out and shape it and everything, but because that is different from what we've talked about with you in the past, which was more of a convention, and actually, indeed, it wasn't even necessarily going to focus on independence. No. So this is a different thing now, isn't it?
Right. So what I was going to say, what's the difference between a convention and a congress? And the reason we've called it a Scottish Independence Congress is because I think there's 3 other Scottish Independence conventions. There's no wrong with that. I'm just wanted to come up with a name that was actually different, that actually said this is different. This is the Believe in Scotland Scottish Independence Congress. So basically, there's that. In terms of the SNP have a plan going to their conference, which there are amendments to, etc., but it does say that they want to create a constitutional convention. So this isn't that. This is the Scottish Independence Congress convention that we're talking about. So we are getting that. And it's not down to the SNP to say whether we have that or not. That's down to the movement to say whether we have that. And the SNP as part of the movement have signed up to this, and I hope the other parties will sign up to it as well. So people are getting the Independence Congress that they really wanted. As far as the Constitutional Convention that the SNP are going to be voting on, if that happens, I think a lot of that is going to be engagement with Civic Scotland. Charities, churches, special interest groups, trade unions in particular, etc. And it's about really highly focused on Scotland's right to choose, which is starting with something that they can all agree on. So, if that passes, then I would hope that Believe in Scotland will be involved in that in some small way. But our focus is the Scottish Independence Congress.
This is different again from the Citizens' Assembly, which we were discussing last time we had you on the programme, isn't it? That's a very different focus.
So the Scottish Citizens, Convention, that is a convention. That's another reason not to use another conventions, too many conventions. The Scottish Citizens Convention really is an idea that would engage the people of Scotland directly, whether they're independence supporters or not, actually try to reach out to millions of Scots and actually say, and people of Scotland as opposed to just Scots, and say, what sort of country do you want? Capture the hopes and dreams of the people that live here, and then base the Independence Manifesto on that. Challenge Westminster to deliver the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people. We know they can't. So that isn't an independence convention. That is a convention for capturing the hopes and dreams of the people of Scotland. So the Scottish Independence Congress is, for lack of a better word, a Scottish Independence Convention, the final word in what the Scottish Independence Conventions will be, we hope. And it's entirely possible that everybody will refuse to join and other parties won't sign, but that's not the impression I'm getting. I'm actually really pleasantly surprised at just how many people from right across the political movement have come on board and said, this is what we're waiting for. Even people I expected to complain about this, they've realised that yes, you have to sign with the SNP first. And yes, the SNP have to sign with us first, because we're the biggest by a factor of many tens, everybody else added together. So basically, in terms of output, etc. And so basically, we're starting with this agreement and we'll move on to other agreements. And we have reached out right across the movement already to many, many organisations. Don't have the time to talk to everybody all at once. But before the actual Scottish Independence Congress meets in its big open meeting, we'll basically have been able to reach everybody and say, is there something you want to be involved with, and come and help us figure out how we make this work for everyone.
What do you think has caused this sort of softening of the SNP's attitude? Has something happened that's made them change, or do you think it's just the context? They're lining up their allies on the side. What's going on?
I think it changed. It changed quite dramatically when Humza stood for First Minister. He phoned me. I talked him through a load of research on messaging, etc. And he said, yeah, I really, really like this. This is great. He talked a lot about the wellbeing economy. He created a wellbeing economy secretary position, etc. And then it all fell apart, right? And when the Butte House agreement ended. So John came in, and I think John's viewpoint was he had to steady the ship. He had to somehow get back to a level of credibility. And I don't think it was the right answer not to talk about independence, certainly before the Hamilton election, etc. But that's kind of seems to be what the SNP thought. They needed to steady the ship and then get on the front foot in independence. But we were there pushing them the whole time to talk about independence, even using my newspaper columns to criticise them for not being forward enough about independence and the benefits to, say, for instance, the people of Hamilton. And eventually we just kept on talking to them. And then there was a sort of a moment where it seemed that they were now ready to focus on independence. And when they did focus on independence, we seemed to agree on an awful lot more than we disagreed on. So we were able to start working together a bit more. And that's where this agreement came from. But let's be clear, there is an election coming as well. But our job as the sort of umbrella organisation of the grassroots independence campaign is not to help a political party in an election, but this agreement means that we will still be talking to them, and we will still be working with them, and we will still be discussing messaging after the election. And that's the key thing as well. And I actually hope that the Scottish Citizens Convention idea will, once we've cleared the election, and the polls are suggesting the SNP are going to win, once we've cleared the election, we will be pushing for that and the independence jurors and to get more and more focus on the need for a wellbeing economy, because it's the wellbeing economy is the radical change. So if you look at reform, for instance, you want to stop reform at the border, you've got to offer radical change, because that's what they're offering. Everybody knows that the system's broken. Everyone knows the UK is bust. They just don't exactly know why, and they don't know what to do. So they're casting around for anyone that says, I'm going to burn the house down. I'm going to build it from scratch. The only person really doing that is Farage, and Labour are trying to copy Farage a little bit, but they've got no credibility to do so. The Tories have lost we're the party of credible management. They've lost that completely. It'll be maybe lost forever, I think. So they're not in this fight. If you want to stop reform actually having an impact in Scotland and taking independence supporters, because there's a lot of people support independence just because it's a radical change, right? You have to make independence that radical change that the people want. Yeah. And to do that, you've got to say, look, this is how it will be better. And the wellbeing economy is the way it gets better. And the wellbeing economy is all about equality. And it's about ending inequality. It's about ending fuel poverty. So these messages, which the SNP are now picking up on without using the word wellbeing, are all part of the wellbeing agenda. So I'm very hopeful that we can steer them in that direction and get the right message going forward. This is what independence is for. It's to build a better Scotland.
Yeah, that's interesting. Use just what you just said, that they use that language without necessarily wrapping it in well-being, but they're going for the same sort of policies. Because we had a really good chat with Philippa Whitford recently, and she said much the same thing. But for some reason, she reckons there were people, in the Scot government, so SNP people in the Scottish government, who don't particularly like talking about well-being as a kind of holistic kind of approach, but they're all for their particular kind of policies. I mean, that's a bit of a puzzle to me, but anyway, if they're for the policies, then that's all to the well.
There is an issue. The example I would give, and I don't know if I've actually said this to you before, but the example I would give is that you can have progress towards a well-being economy by saying we're doing well-being stuff. We're adding well-being style policies onto what we do. Baby box, carers allowance. You could call all of those well-being things, but they're well-being policies that are sort of nice left-wing add-ons. And that actually misses the point. And that's not the full transition to a well-being economy, because there are right-wing add-ons as well. In fact, it gets rid of left and right-wing, and it just common sense add-ons. And the key way to understand the wellbeing economy is that it's not about left and right. It's not about socialism or capitalism. It's about the fact that you can't have a strong society without a strong economy, and you can't have a strong economy without a strong society. Two sides of the same coin. And if people just instantly get that, and if you were to take a look at the NHS, for instance, and say, okay, how does the well-being, if you're going to say, right, we're having a well-being economy approach to absolutely everything, and I also call it a well-being economy approach, but I tend to, when I'm writing, I call it a well-being socio-economic approach, because I don't believe there is economy. I believe there is only socio-economy, right? And so basically, if you look at the NHS and you say, do we have a well-being-led NHS? No, we don't. We have an NHS that repairs people who are already broken. Right? If you were to have a well-being service rather than a national health service, a true national health service rather than a national fixing broken people service, then you would start at school, you would start at childbirth. Well, actually, maybe you'd start with a baby box, and you'd have policies that help and assist throughout life. You certainly wouldn't have a two-child cap and all these things as well. And so basically what you would have is a healthier, fitter nation that doesn't get ill so much. And guess what? It costs billions less per year. To run.
And look what it unleashes in terms of our possibilities as a nation.
Yes, I know. It's like the other day, Gordon, when we were trying to fix up a time to talk to you, and I said, well, if necessary, I'll cancel my Tai Chi class. And I was taken with your immediate response was, oh no, don't do that. And because obviously you do Tai Chi yourself, and you hadn't done it that morning, and you noticed the difference. And it's that sort of thing, isn't it? You have kind of routines in your life and things that you do. It might be Tai Chi, but it might be always going out for an afternoon cup of tea with your pals, actually, kind of thing. That, you know, little things like that that kind of all, in the end, you know, end up can certainly improve people's mental health as well as physical health. So, look, you mentioned Keith Brown as being that he'd come up with. I think I heard you say that he'd come up with the idea of the understanding kind of setup. I've heard him saying a couple of times that, making the point that yes, he's there and he's an MSP, but he doesn't want to be part of the Scottish government. He doesn't want a government appointment. He wants to be there, being able to, you know, put pressure behind and make more kind of obvious, you know, public kind of announcements and ideas about achieving independence. So I was just quite interested when you said he was the person who'd, you know, in a way come up with something that then you and the First Minister went, aye, okay, that'll work.
He's our point man, really, in talking with the SNP right now, not with the Scottish Government, but with the SNP. That's his sort of role in this. And I can see that he's quite charged up about the opportunities for this and his own ideas for the Constitutional Convention. So it's early days. Better relationships are on the way, but better relationships mean nothing unless we turn that into actions. And that's what we will hopefully be able to do. Now, obviously, all of the political parties are going to be focused on their electoral chances. From this point on, the campaign for Holyrood has already started. It's our job to keep independence right at the top of the agenda for Holyrood, and to say to the political parties that we want to make sure that you actually are progressing independence during these campaigns. So, you know, we can hold our feet to the fire on those sort of things if anyone thinks that they're not. But I would imagine with independence so much more popular than all the political parties added together, the pro-yes independence political parties added together, I think we're pushing water downhill on that one at the moment.
You know, I hadn't realised until you've explained it there, these suggestions made by Keith Brown in the course of a meeting, and you've instantly had to react to it and capitalise on what was perhaps an unexpected bit of progress that you made. And I'm just wondering then, does that then give you a different issue, which is bringing the rest of us with you?
So Believe in Scotland are not exclusively full of SNP fans. And therefore, some people were like, why are we doing the SNP first? Why are we doing an agreement with the SNP? Why don't we do them all at once? You can't do them all at once.
Yeah,
it can't
and the SNP is the biggest. If you'd announced an agreement with Alba first, that would have been a very different sort of optic, wouldn't it, for the organisations?
Getting other people to sign after one of the other parties would be more difficult than people would accept that, as long as we in the SNP kick the ball off, and then quickly afterwards we reach agreements with other parties. Now, the thing is that I'm confident we'll reach agreements with other parties because I think they'll be sensible about it. I think they all want to get together to have a independence congress. I don't think they want to rule themselves out because basically everybody else is coming together. And I think, you know, it will be open and inclusive as we can make it. You know, so there will be some people will be disappointed because, you know, they'll have written a few blogs and think they should have a major, you know, speaking opportunity. And I've never heard of them.
That's who he's talking about.
Well, you guys are definitely going to be there. That's for sure.
Definitely, absolutely.
We've gone live.
I mean, it's good to hear you just explain that background, because you may have picked this up already. There's been one or two, a couple of letters that appeared in the National, even since, you know, made the announcement about the Memorandum of Understanding. But someone saying, well, yeah, but have you just gone and done this, and did you consult with the people in Believe in Scotland before this person? But obviously, you know, you have.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who are really emotionally triggered, and if we had signed an agreement with the Greens first, we'd have got as many, if not more, letters of complaint. If we'd done it with Alba first, we'd have got as many letters of complaint, etc. But, you know, we're talking about letters of complaint. We're talking about somebody writing a letter to the National. You know, I hate to break it to you, but a lot of people who are very highly emotionally triggered write letters to the National, and they're not always that well informed. And the one that you're mentioning is on our subscriber database, because they responded to our newsletter asking and saying that exact same thing. And we responded and pointed out all the things that we were actually doing, and they'd misunderstood it. We don't get a chance to do that in the National. But let me just put this into context. We've never put out anything that has gone down as well as this. We've never had so many messages saying, wow, great, well done. This is what the movement needs. We can see this happening, right? This is going to be positive, etc. And we've had that from right across the movement. So what we're talking about is a very, very small amount of people, no more than we get on a daily basis anyway. And I'll be honest with you, I was expecting it to be not like this. But my point is, we don't need the entire movement, every group in the entire movement to join up to this. We just need the vast majority, and we are going to get that.
It'll kind of grow organically, hopefully, in the way 2014 did, won't it? People will just do their own wee thing, but as part of a bigger thing. I mean, our first reaction when we heard about it was, wow, what a coup. We just thought, it was, what a masterstroke.
Yes.
Well, the SNP to even acknowledge we exist would be a masterstroke compared to
I know.
For the last 10 years. Yeah.
It's strange, isn't it? You could say the same for, like Commonweal as well. You can. I'm not sure that. I think they get a bit more acknowledgement as well, but they didn't actually years back. A lot of this is going to be really positive, and it's great to hear that sort of background to it about the amount of positive response you've got. But there's also people who are not maybe activists, but nevertheless want Scotland to be independent, and who vote for independent supporting parties. They're concerned with more with things like, well, look, the cost of electricity every month, or getting their youngsters into a play group, something like that. They're concerned with the more kind of hands-on stuff. So now, Believe in Scotland itself has got a few campaigns going, particularly the I Switch one. But other political parties have their own approach to some of these policies. Do you think there's going to be the scope for any kind of joint campaigning together?
So in terms of joint campaigning, not in the run-up to Holyrood, because that's a proper electoral campaign. However, we have in the past, I think it was, when was it, 2019, 2020? I can't actually remember what year it was we did it. Might have been more recent than that. We actually put a Wellbeing economy newspaper out with the SNP.
Oh, I remember that.
And we put out 1 million copies of that newspaper. We got the National to print the newspaper for us, and we distributed it throughout Scotland. And that was an agreement at the time between ourselves, the SNP and the Scottish Greens. So it was the two parties of government and ourselves teamed up, distributed 1 million bits of campaign material out there on Wellbeing economy, and the polls jumped 3 or 4% from the point before we started distributing that to the point that we actually put it out, finished distributing it. And then the very next thing that happened was Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon started giving evidence against one another on Holyrood, and it went right by that.
Yeah. That I Switch leaflet, though, that when we were at the launch in Perth, just the response that the stalls were getting in the street made you think this is something in a different league to previous campaigns. What kind of response are you getting to that?
Well, so during a day of action a few weeks ago, we had about 40 odd stalls across the country. But we had during the day of action and the following week another 30, 40, maybe even more leafleting teams dropping the leaflet off, etc. And the feedback has been great from a lot of them. I was standing outside the Langside Halls on the south side of Glasgow, actually just wearing a high vis and walking up to people in the street and saying, "Excuse me, you're getting ripped off your energy bills." And they're all thinking I'm going to try and switch them, especially as I've got an iSwitch. They're thinking I'm going, this isn't about switching. This isn't about switching energy companies. It's about switching countries, and explaining how Scotland is getting ripped off. And I have never, in all my years of campaigning for independence, which I wouldn't, ever since I was at first year at university, I've been campaigning for independence. And I've never had a response like this.
Oh,
You know, I also had outside Langside halls. I had complete no's moving to complete yeses and saying I didn't know all of this. Nobody's ever talked to me about independence like this before. That doesn't happen in all the years. You can move complete no's to okay, you've made some good points, but to get them going, shit, yeah, you're right. I don't know why nobody's told me this before. And it was like, you know, they were walking away and we're sort of like looking at one another going, that's not happened before. Yeah. You know, that's really good. And then I went to Barrhead, which is a fairly lower income part of the West Coast, and I distributed around Barrhead, and lots of people were out. It was quite a good day. People were out in the garden, washing their cars, working on their cars, all that sort of stuff, and had a lot of conversations, and a lot of them were just totally open about how far they were behind on their energy bills, thousands of pounds. Can't heat their house, winter's coming, what am I going to do? And I've never realised just, you know, I know how bad the energy bills are, and I know that the energy bills are what causes inflation, have caused the cost of living crisis, because energy is the cost of food is really an energy price increase, amongst other things. But I never realised just exactly how hard it is hitting the poorer parts of society. So I knew it, but I didn't feel it until I was there, till I was talking to these guys and these ladies, and I just thought, wow, yeah, this is an important campaign. So I'm really, really pleased that we're getting that message out there. So iSwitch is part of the campaign, but there's a second part of it as well. And the second part is called End the Scottish Energy Bill Ripoff. And so basically we're doing a series of 10 blogs, and then I'm doing 10 straight to camera with some graphics, explainer videos, which can be taken apart and used for TikTok, etc., explaining the energy market in real layman's terms that people could understand, that yes, you are, as a Scottish person, charged more for your own energy than people in London are. And that, for instance, you know, we're paying 27 pence per kilowatt hour for our electricity, and Norway's paying 10 for theirs, and they're passing a new law to limit it to 3 pence per kilowatt hour. You know.
Yeah. All right, I'm just going to cry. I'm just going to go.
Yeah, I'm just going to get something. But
so
that's a well-being issue.
How can our businesses compete? Yeah. Well, it's a well-being issue in terms of people being able to afford to keep their families warm in wintertime and even cook, etc. But it's also a commercial issue, and this is why there's no left and right in this, because if we pay currently in the north of Scotland, the Highland region, which is anything basically above Glasgow, pays the highest commercial energy costs in the world. If you run a hotel and restaurant in Oban, you're paying the highest energy prices in the world. So what would happen to our economy if we were to get those prices down to somewhere around Norway's? Boom.
Well, our entire public transport system has largely been electrified as well. The costs of that would plummet. But there was something just when you were talking there, and the reason I jumped in and said, it's a wellbeing issue as well. We were at Danny Dorling's presentation at Holyrood in the Festival of Politics. And he came up with an image which has haunted me ever since I heard it. He said that there are babies who have never been washed in anything other than cold water. And he knows that because people can't afford to put the heating on. Therefore, they can only wash their babies in cold water. And that, for some reason, is just such a graphic image that if that's your start in life, how can it not affect your well-being right from birth? I mean, it's a horrific image. And yet that must be the reality right across Scotland in these households who are so poor that it's heating or eating. And
but it also builds, because what you've just described there plays into that NHS National Wellbeing Service, because they're not going to be well babies, they're not going to be well children, they're not going to have the start in life. And then you've got older folks who are catching pneumonia because they put the heating off because they were frightened to put the heating on. And, you know, so yes, it's an economic issue, it's a well-being issue. I mean, there are also industries that Scotland should be trying to take the lead in. such as artificial intelligence. We've had some great work done, especially Edinburgh and Glasgow universities. And we're not commercializing that because artificial intelligence takes a heck of a lot of energy, as do cryptocurrencies. And, energy is more expensive here. But also, if you want to decarbonize your energy supply, well, hydrogen can be used as a sort of battery storage solution. And hydrogen is more expensive because our energy is more expensive.
Yeah, I mean that point about pulling in industries into Scotland, but then being put if they're high energy users being put off. I mean that was another point that Philippa Whitford made, but I think a lot of people have a lot of regard for Philippa, but we think about her as being someone who's an expert in the National Health Service because she's a former surgeon, but actually she was one of the SNP spokespeople down in Westminster on energy, and she knows a hell of a lot about it, and that was the first time I'd heard someone saying, well, if we could if our energy costs could be substantially lowered, as they might well be with independent Scotland, or probably not before that. Actually, then we can pull. That is going to help all of us, but we will be able to pull in industrial, companies to come and base themselves here. That's the kind of thing to put across, isn't it? It'll help us all individually, but it'll also help, the bigger, the wider economy. I mean, I do wish that the Scottish Government were a bit braver in just the way they talk about these things, and make it plain that that's what could happen if we were independent, but we can't happen. We can't do it. Partly because we've got Ed Miliband down the road, who says, we won't go zonal, we won't have a zonal electricity kind of pricing because that wouldn't be fair on the people in London. They'd have to pay more.
We've been paying more for how long?
Yeah, exactly. That is incredibly unfair, and it demonstrates quite clearly that they just don't care about Scotland. But a really good example in terms of how business could thrive. I mean, Scotland isn't self-sufficient in aluminium production. We have one aluminium smelter in Fort William, and it's struggling largely because of the cost of energy means it's difficult to be profitable. Norway, our identical twin nation with the same size population and the same amount of oil, etc., has, I think, 7 aluminium smelters. And 5 of them are owned by a hydroelectric company who just had loads of energy left over and wanted to find a profitable way to. It's just ludicrous how that's why they are the richest nation in the world. It's not just a fund. Yeah,
they've not sold off all these state assets either, so the profits get siphoned off abroad. They've still got nationalised industries, which I mean, we're going to have to do a massive amount of nationalisation come the glorious day.
So I think we said to you before we started, we had a few questions that people had sent into us that because we were talking to you. Actually, I think you've pretty well covered them because there was a few people asking involving groups. So obviously you've been doing that anyway, but the Congress is going to take that even further. And then people wondering about the timing of it. Maybe that's something we could talk more about. But then the other main point that was brought up is about, Believe in Scotland's non-aligned, non-party political. So isn't there a danger you'll be, seen as... But so obviously you've covered that because, you're talking to the other parties. So I think maybe what was the point about timing?
The timing was, is there a date for the next Congress? People were getting quite interested in that.
We do quarterly congresses and the next one is due at the end of November. So hopefully we will have everyone agreed on and signed up, that we want to have signed up, and then we can get an online congress with hundreds of local organisers there and representatives of the parties at the end of November, and start designing what we want the actual Scottish Independence Congress to do, when it will meet, etc. And then we'll start planning the big gathering, which will be a hybrid gathering, because we know people can't make it from Orkney, Shetland and Iona, etc., necessarily down to Glasgow or Edinburgh, wherever we actually have a centre. But we'll make sure that certain sessions are led from outside of Glasgow. This is, so we've done a fair bit of thinking about it already, and also how this might actually require a restructuring of our organisation, because we were set up for a referendum that might not be happening. So we're set up for, and my personal view is the most likely route to independence is the general election in 2029. And that is what I'm trying to get everybody ready for. So the timing of this is to get everybody ready for a time when, so let's just say that the polls are suggesting the SNP are going to form the next Scottish government. The polls are also suggesting Plaid Cymru will win in Wales, which I think is great news.
It would be fabulous, yeah.
That'd be fabulous.
A year after that, at the latest, expect a Sinn Féin landslide in Northern Ireland. And then you've got Scotland, Wales looking at independence, led by independence parties. You've got, and progressing towards independence, and you've got Ireland progressing towards unification. And then we've got an English nationalist who doesn't give a damn about anyone except England, about to become a massive landslide far right-wing leader of the United Kingdom on the basis that most people happen to live in England. I think at that point, in 2 years' time, when the Northern Ireland election happens, the final jigsaw piece comes. I think the constitutional question has radically changed from 2014, has radically changed from even last year, the year before. I think everyone's going to be looking at it differently. And if we then have a 2-year period where the Scottish Independence Congress has actually planned and got our campaign going properly, and the Scottish Citizens Convention is ready to report in 2 years' time, and say this is the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people, and challenge Farage or anybody else that wants to be Prime Minister to actually deliver the hopes and dreams of the Scottish people are going to go, independence is the only solution to Scotland's problems, to achieving Scotland's potential, and it's over, right? So that's what I think is the route forward. In the meantime, should the SNP be able to force, which they hope they can, a referendum, great. But if they can't, de facto next general election is the only way out. And we are preparing, Believe in Scotland is preparing for that route now, which is why we're signing agreements now, which is why we're getting this all out of the way before the Holyrood campaign starts. And the other reason for me wanting to push this and to push the other parties as well is because, I mean, we've been getting some great publicity recently, and one of, raising our own profile and actually the push that we have to do all of this and to campaign even more. It costs money, and we're about to launch our annual crowdfunder, and we want people to know just what we are pushing for before we do that. So that's the timing of it.
Yeah,
because we're thinking the next general election, not Holyrood.
Right.
Sorry, we're strategically that far ahead because that's when we think we can deliver independence.
Yeah, that's great. I was just about to say all this is going to cost money, isn't it? So that's good to have pulled that in.
I should have let you set me up for that rather than pushing it myself, shouldn't I?
Just proves that we're not quite as slick as we might be with these things. But on the other hand, it's perhaps a better way of going about it. I mean, and actually, talking with that that sort of strategic approach to it, so up to the next Westminster election, what's that, 2029, isn't it? I mean, there's a bit of me goes, oh God, am I still going to be around? Because, you kind of get older and you think, oh God, I need this to happen. I need this to happen soon. Well, but, it's probably still okay. I'll be managed to hobble up to vote or get a postal vote doing. But you see, that kind of strategic thinking and making that plain and publicising it and getting it well known and getting folk, like ourselves and the other folk in the indie movement, the kind of grassroots, to be able to get that into people's minds and know how it will work, and know how it will work for an Alba supporter and how it will work for a Green supporter. And also, we haven't mentioned the Scottish Socialist Party, but they're also another independence party, and they might even get an MSP, or a couple of them in next year. So that's all important, isn't it? It kind of gets us into, look, there's the strategy. That's what it's going to be. If things happen, well, things always happen. Events always happen, but that's a really strong basis.
But you've just reminded me of something that although I'm talking about the next general election as being realistically when I think we can deliver everything, you've just mentioned the Scottish Socialist Party, and I remember that Richie Venton from the Scottish Socialist Party was a speaker at our March and Rally, the Believe in Scotland March and Rally.
Yes.
So yeah, we will be reaching out to them as well. We have to prioritise those that have got seats right now. But the other thing is that about that March and Rally, that at that March and Rally, that Humza was speaking at as well, and Martin Comston joined us on the march, etc. At that March and Rally, I stood there without telling Humza in advance, and I called for the next Holyrood election to be a de facto referendum, right, with a declaration if we win. I think if we had a solid run-in from there where we're actually preparing for a de facto, because it's very, very different from a referendum, right? Referendum is much more easy to win than a de facto referendum, because in a referendum, people are being asked to either vote for their country or not, right? And that's why we went from 27 to
clear
45,
question,
right?
yeah.
It's a clear question. Whereas in a de facto, you're asking them to vote for a party, and you've already seen how one or two people, throwing the toys out the pram because we've done something with the SNP, and more will do it when we do it, if we do it with Alba and when we do it with the Greens as well, right? So even with our own movement, voting for a party is harder, right? But it's harder for Lib Dems, the handful of Tories, and the 20 to 30% of Labour voters in the last general election who actually support independence. It's harder for them to vote SNP than it is for them to put a cross beside a yes box. Yeah. So, given how messed up things have been, the question is it an ideal? Could we possibly do it between now and Holyrood? Possibly. Is it an ideal situation? No, absolutely not. We're nowhere near where I'd want us to be, right? We're nowhere near ready. But could we do it? Yeah, we probably could. I hope we could. What's the worst that could happen? If we go de facto and lose, we're finished. Finished.
Yeah.
And so basically, if we're going to go de facto, we have to have a proper run-in. And that lineup that I said would happen when that national conversation is happening, and we've put everything in place. We've got a wellbeing economy approach. We've got the Scottish Citizens Convention in place, capturing hopes and dreams. We will be ready.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We will be ready. I believe we can win it.
Yes, I think what you've just said is you could try and make the Holyrood election a de facto election. Was that right?
You still could.
Yeah.
But they've got, when looking at any strategy, you have to consider what is the best that can happen and what's the worst that can happen. And my view is that the SNP will decide at its conference what its approach is going to be to Holyrood, right? Not my business. It's my business to promote independence. But once we've had the Holyrood election, it is the business of everybody in the independence movement to say, okay, either that worked or it didn't. And if it didn't work, this is how we go from here.
Yeah.
And that's what I want the Scottish Independence Congress to do, right? But at this point, it's not down to me. I'm not a member of any political party deliberately. And it's not down to me to try and, because I have to represent members of every party are members of Believe in Scotland, donors to Believe in Scotland, activists, So whatever the SNP democratically decides is what the SNP will do. We won't get behind any particular party, but I do believe that the most likely outcome is that we're not going to get a referendum one way or the other, no matter what you do for Holyrood. And therefore, I believe, so I'm not supporting either or dissing either of those two stances, the parties or the group of 32. I think it's 32 branches of them that were involved. I'm not going one way or the other on this. What I'm saying is I think the most likely outcome is that we're going to have to go de facto in the next general election. I think that's going to be 2029. And so I'm about getting ready for that now, because I'm about independence, not about winning Holyrood.
Yeah.
Right? Unless Holyrood is about independence, and I don't know if it's going to be this time.
That's the plan B that has always been missing so far, I think, in the discussions that I've had. I'm not a member of any party either, but the kind of options that have been bandied around seem to me the two least likely things to happen is that you either get an SNP total majority or you'll get a majority of votes on the list. What seems to be more likely to happen is we might get a majority between SNP and Greens. Now, why that wouldn't be good enough?
Well, it's good enough. It is morally good enough.
Yeah, it's democratically good enough.
Absolutely, it absolutely should be. So no one should ever say, and I don't think the SNP or anybody in the SNP ever has, but no one should ever say that a majority of pro-independence MSPs is not a mandate for a referendum. If you want to make it a mandate for beginning negotiations on independence, go ahead. We will push like mad on independence, not on political messaging, but on independence messaging if you decide to do that. But if you was to say there's a single mandate, which is a all party majority of pro, and there's a double mandate, and the double mandate would be what we got in 2011. And the question is that stronger? And I wonder if in the court of public opinion that would be stronger. But the SNP were, at the point they announced that strategy, 10% below what they need to be in to deliver it. I think reform splitting the Tory vote has maybe opened the door a little bit. And no one knows, though, until we get Corbyn's party, which has been shooting itself in the foot left, right and centre, right? Left, right, and big toe, little toe, right in the middle. And so until they get their act together, announce what they're doing, and then we poll multiple times and see who they're taking votes from, we don't know. So people keep on asking me, what do you think is the best way to vote? And I go, I don't know. There's a major player not announced yet, not polled yet. I don't know.
Starmer said no, regardless. He's already ruled out everything on the basis of what?
So what we need to do is to make saying no so repulsive and anti-democratic in the mind of the Scottish people. That it actually matters that he says no, because the last time saying no, it didn't matter because the Scottish people were like, well, you didn't have the power and you ended up referring yourself to the Supreme Court. It's a total mess.
There's got to be a consequence to him saying it.
Yeah, there's no consequence. If the Scottish people believe that, wait a second, we've just had a holiday election, there's either a single or a double majority for an independence referendum or for independence, whichever's chosen. If you say no, it becomes poisonous to say no. The people will start to rise up at that point. The people will say, right, we're taking to the streets, we're going to demonstrate, we're going to complain, we'll never vote. Every council election, you get wiped out, you lose your deposit everywhere. All of a sudden, the press getting you back, companies are going, wait a second, you're being undemocratic here. All that sort of thing. International pressure happens. These sort of things. So you've got to, but that didn't happen and couldn't have happened when you're referring yourself, already having been told by your own lawyer that you're in the wrong, to the Supreme Court for a slap on the wrist. That's not the mechanism. But if the Scottish people go, wait a second, there blooming well ought to be a referendum now. You can't say no to this. And then they say no. Great, that's what we want to be. Let's hope they're that stupid to say no. Yeah.
That plus the energy thing, which is just such an injustice, that it's got the kind of poll tax injustice about it to me. And I mean, there's other things you could add on there, the housing crisis, land reform, all sorts. But energy is just such an open goal, really, for us, that I'm really, really very optimistic about the this whole I Switch campaign.
The actions of the Labour Party since they got in, I mean, they're sitting there with this massive majority, and they're shooting themselves in the foot. Not just Corbyn people, but the Labour Party. In fact, I think part of the reason for you getting that such a positive response, when you've been out with the I Switch leaflets. I mean, there's the fact that the leaflets themselves are really, really good. I mean, they're so excellent. But there's also the fact that yes, exactly, Scotland. I mean, I know, maybe going to the Supreme Court was a bit also shooting ourselves in the foot. On the other hand, suddenly there was this general election and we lost all those MPs because Scots thought, we just need to get rid of the Tories and we'll do it that way. And it wasn't very logical, but there you go. It happened.
But the SNP were going with the slogan, get rid of the Tories, because they thought it helped them because all the marginal seats were SNP Tory marginals. But what happened was that in SNP Tory marginals, SNP members wanted to get rid of the Tories, so they voted Labour because this is a general election.
Yeah.
People don't understand how difficult it is to get people to tactically vote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. So in a way, that set up a lot of expectation and hope, and those of us who are a little bit older, kind of, we've got a view about what a Labour Party does and doesn't do, and and since then, a lot of that hope has just been dashed. It's kind of emptied out on the floor. It strikes me that part of the reason you get such a positive response to iSwitch from folk on the street is because the Labour Party went into election saying, by the way, we'll save you £300 on your bills, and since then they've all gone up by about
300
or something. As much as that, as about 187, I thought was the last one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I think, they need to see that someone's standing up for them. And I think that if we can bring the whole independence movement together, they'll realise that it's independence that's standing up for them, not just a political party. And that will benefit all the political parties of independence.
Yeah.
And in terms of Labour, I mean, you're saying you had an idea or a concept from the past as to what a Labour government would do and what it stood for. I didn't have that, because I had absolutely no hope whatsoever, because I remember the disappointment with Tony Blair and they're just trying desperately to repeat that trick, to play that trick that won once before. But it was really about the Conservatives disintegrating rather than Labour going up. And a lot of people dispute this, but Jeremy Corbyn got a higher percentage share of the general election vote than Starmer did.
Yeah,
and Corbyn got wiped out, and Starmer got a majority. So this is not about Labour actually being popular. It never was. But immediately afterwards, I wrote a piece. I can't remember if it was one of my national columns or for Believe in Scotland, which was Labour have just entered the last chance saloon. Either they make this work, or the union's dead. And I think that's what's happened. That has played out. And that is the direction that we're going in, because Labour have failed. The Tories can't come back. Reform is a desperate reaching out, grasping at straws. I'm afraid Corbyn's going to be something similar. If he couldn't win when he was in control of the whole Labour movement, how's he going to win starting from scratch when he's not particularly a great organiser, as we're already seeing with the breakups and threatening to sue one another. I think we are looking at Nigel Farage, an unreconstructed British nationalist, English exceptionalist, in charge of Great Britain unless we leave. The only way to beat him is to have a better idea as to what Scotland's future can be. And that's what we're trying to work and to put in place. And, so we just need people to work. We need people to believe. And I think that a lot of people were just looking for something positive to happen within the independence movement. And that's why this agreement with the SNP, and you have to say the SNP jumping on this, the SNP putting pen to paper and saying we're going to work with people outside of the SNP, never ever happened before, that we will join and send speakers to the Scottish Independence Congress, and they accept that other parties will be involved in that. And if we tried to put together an Independence Congress that people were calling for, if the SNP had said they were going to do it, not everybody would go.
No.
So the only organisation that could do it is Believe in Scotland. And hopefully we are going to be able to build positive relationships with the other parties and bring everybody on board, and everybody will be heard as we plan this new push to independence, post-Holyrood, whatever happens there.
And hopefully, out of that, everyone will be able to see how there's much more that we have in common. There are, there's arguments and fights even, but actually there's a lot more that unites us than there is that separates us, and hopefully that a congress like this could make that really apparent. So I mean, well done for getting it to this stage.
Definitely.
Gordon.
Exciting.
Exciting, and and along with everything else, and let's hope that there's a few more announcements to come out very soon about other folk that have joined in. But thanks. Great to talk to you.
We hope so too. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thanks Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to make sure you're following us and subscribe to us, then you get notified every time we put something new out, so you don't miss anything. That would be great. Also, you can click the little bell if you're watching on YouTube.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website, and we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.